when you look at successful AEC organizations today, how much of their competitive advantage do you believe comes down to the strength of their leaders?
The first would be discretionary effort. We define discretionary effort as the difference between what an individual has to do to keep his or her paycheck and then what they can do when they give their best effort. And what research has shown is that usually someone can keep their job if they give 70% effort. It's somewhere around there. If someone's giving 70%, you're probably not going to go through the trouble of firing them. But what that means is that extra 30% is your competitive advantage.
As a technical leader, there are only two things that you have to work with. And knowing this equation and how to balance these two items appropriately is key to your leadership effectiveness. Well, in today's episode, I'm joined by Luke Carter, managing partner at Talent Matters, where he works with AEC firms to strengthen leadership capability and develop the people who will shape the future of their organization. Luke is going to share this equation with you today so you can use it for yourself and with your organization. We're also going to talk about why leadership is often an organization's greatest competitive advantage, why many technical professionals really struggle when they're stepping into leadership roles, and how organizations can design leadership development programs that lead to real lasting change. And we also have some personal tips in here as well. So if your organization is looking to develop leaders more effectively, or you're looking to develop yourself, then you've come to the right place. Now, before we jump in with Luke, I do want to tell you about AEC PM Connect, a series of in-person events that we've created at EMI for AEC project managers and the leaders who develop them. If you want to stay on top of PM trends, elevate your team, and deliver stronger project results, these full-day events are built for you. We're coming to New Jersey this June. In fact, Luke will be there speaking on how to assess project managers at our event in June, but we'll also be in Kansas City in October. Learn more and register at aecpmconnect.com. Here's a quick word from one of our AEC PM Connect sponsors, Talent Matters. Talent Matters helps you gain a competitive advantage through your people. They understand that an organization rises or falls based on the effectiveness of its leaders and people. Their sole focus is to help you select, develop, and retain high performers. When selecting people, Talent Matters ensures your interviews reveal the right behaviors to support strong hiring decisions. When developing leaders, their skill-based model and process unlock hesitancy and empower leaders to manage with boldness, compassion, and skill. This is your performance advantage. To chat directly with their team, visit talentmatters.net. I'm your host, Anthony Pisano, and this is the AEC Leadership Podcast. Luke, welcome to the AEC Leadership Podcast.
Thanks, Anthony. It's good to be here.
So, Luke, maybe to start us off, you can kind of walk us through your career journey and how you became focused on leadership development and talent within the AEC realm.
Yeah, great question. As I look back, I think a couple things have really led to where I'm at today. One is my background in engineering and then my military background. The third thing that comes to mind is just the influence I've had from getting to work for and be under great leaders. So whether that was my parents, my coaches, my teachers in early life, but also in business and military, that's had a huge influence on me. But as far as my career goes, I went to NC State University for civil engineering and got a structural design engineering degree. I love math and physics and have enjoyed that side of my career, but I paused after college and went into the United States Marine Corps. I'd had a lifelong desire actually to serve my country, inspired by both my grandfather serving in World War II and just other influences on my life. And I wanted to lead a Marine Corps infantry platoon, and I got to do that. So I was a platoon commander in the Marine Corps. I also led at the company level, and we were a helicopter quick reaction raid force and served all over the world on ship and doing training and readiness missions around the world. So one of my biggest lesson from that was that you can learn leadership. While there are things you bring to leadership from your life, it is a skill you can learn. And I want to share that with others. After my military, I was a leader and an engineer in the steel manufacturing industry and did that for several years and really got to personally experienced that transition from technical leader or engineer to supervisor and people leader, and also got to take part in some great leadership training, just like I did in the military. So there's a lot of factors that led me to now being part of running my own business, which I love doing. But I'd say the biggest one is a desire to teach people to lead, like I was taught in the military and through my business career. And so that's what inspires me today.
That's great. Well, I'm very appreciative of you being here and, of course, serving our country. That's amazing. And it sounds like your background with the leadership plus the civil engineering and just your own leaders and mentors has really set a great backdrop for what you do today. And I guess my next question for you, Luke, would be when you look at successful AEC organizations today, how much of their competitive advantage do you believe comes down to the strength of their leaders?
Wow. Leadership is so critical, being able to effectively lead people. Because, I mean, we view organizations as living organizations. An organization is a makeup of people to go out and do something, to provide a service, and then receive a benefit from that. And so leadership is the glue of all of that. And I think three things come to mind for me. The first would be discretionary effort. We define discretionary effort as the difference between what an individual has to do to keep his or her paycheck and then what they can do when they give their best effort. And what research has shown is that usually someone can keep their job if they give 70% effort. It's somewhere around there. If someone's giving 70%, you're probably not going to go through the trouble of firing them. So, but what that means is that that extra 30% is your competitive advantage as an organization from a people leadership standpoint. And the most effective leaders are the ones that learn how to inspire, motivate, and even require people to give their best. So just imagine as a company, if you have most or all of your employees just giving 70% versus most or all of your employees giving 100%, and what a difference that's going to be for your bottom line. The second, so that's discretionary effort. The second is autonomy. If I like to think of a leader's job as building autonomy in the people they lead. Can you develop someone to become autonomous in all their tasks and do it at a high performing level? Because think of the benefit of that. If most everyone in your organization are autonomous on the skills they're assigned, you as the leader can then do what? You can go lead. You can orchestrate. You can do strategic planning. You can make things better. You can go get more business. The last thing I think about with competitive advantage is top performance equals return customers. If I'll ask you, Anthony, if you called a company you bought a service from recently or a product and you need help and you've never called them before, how long does it take you to tell if that person you're talking to is a high performer?
Yeah, I think you get a feel for it pretty quickly in the way they respond and react, their energy.
Yeah. Yeah, if you think about it, you can tell almost immediately, are they a high performer or a low performer? And if that's your only interaction with that company, how is that going to affect your future buying decisions with that company? If it's a low performer, that's going to cause a negative experience and impact you negatively in some way. But if it's a high performer, that increases your trust of that company and makes you want to go back to them in the future. So the leader has the opportunity to develop high performing team members that the customer is interacting with, and you're increasing the odds that your customers are returning to you because they're having positive interactions and they're building trust and respect for your organization. So, yeah, discretionary effort, autonomy, building top performance are three clear ways that leaders bring competitive advantage to any organization.
In the AEC industry, skilled project managers are the backbone of success. EMI's AEC PM certification offers tailored training, ongoing support, and exclusive access to premium content that keeps your team sharp and effective. From foundational training to advanced leadership tools, set your team apart with certified growth. Learn more at aecpm.com. That's aecpm.com. Yeah, those are great. And I think one way that I can think about kind of tying all those up in a bow is when you think about something comes across your desk and you need help with it, right? It's like you think about who you want to give it to on your team. who jumps out at you, right? Is like the person who you know is like, this person's going to get it done. They're going to be responsive. This is an important task. I trust them with that. So, and I think that's probably a culmination of doing a number of the things that you just mentioned, which would make them stand out in that way of being kind of the go-to person, if you will. And I think to your same example of if you called up a company and randomly got someone, I think you could think of it the same way as if something came across your desk, who are you calling first?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, because there's internal customer service as well. And who are you going to rely on? Who are you going to go back to?
Absolutely. And those person that are doing the extra 30%, I think are going to be those ones that are going to absolutely stand out. So, Luke, you and your partners, Colin Reed, you guys do a lot of work with leaders, assessing leaders, developing leaders. We do a lot of work with you guys as well at EMI. So I know you've seen a lot of leadership development. Why do technical professionals, architects, engineers, other technical experts, why do they find that transition into leadership so challenging in your opinion from what you've seen?
Yeah, first, it's such an understandable challenge. Many of us, if you're a leader, have been there probably in some way. You're pushed to a leadership role, and all of a sudden things are different, and we don't always know why. And it's an understandable challenge because leadership is just hard. It's one of the hardest and most admirable things someone can learn how to do. And the reality is the behaviors that helped, let's go with an engineer being to be a technical expert, I would say will continue to help you as a leader. They're not going to be out, but there's going to be more behaviors that you need to bring into play. And if you miss those, you could find a leadership role to be extra challenging. And that's one of the main things we help leaders to identify is what are the current behaviors helping you in this new position, but what are the other muscles you need to develop? And I'll just give one kind of simple example. Engineers are usually really good at being analytical. We have to be. You have to analyze data and make good designs or decisions about technical situations from that data. A leader also has to be intuitive in addition to being analytical. And those are seemingly opposite. We call it a paradox. Analyzing is looking at the data, intuitive is listening to your gut, let's say. And leaders, as you grow more and more in leadership roles, you have to be more willing to listen to your gut, not to be reckless or illogical or non logical, but to find the areas in a more uncertain situations that you need to analyze. And so that's one example of a leader that's transitioning from technical to leader has an opportunity to leverage their analytical ability. But if they do it alone, they might be laser logical and get stuck sometimes. And as a leader,
Mm.
they can really develop that intuitive nature, bring it into pair with that analytical skill set, and be what we call have the skill of logical intuition, and that can really help a leader to make that transition. So it's all about identifying where you're good now, what's going to help you as a leader from your previous work, but then building new skills.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think that in, I have a little bit of background with Luke because we've done a lot of work with his team on looking at the Harrison and this, looking at the paradox theory. But I do think that it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. There are traits as a leader that you're going to need to leverage or utilize two traits that do appear to be opposite, or maybe they are opposite, but they can really also work very much together. And I think he gave a good example there. And I think it's something that we really need to make sure that we think about as leaders because a lot of times we're going to be comfortable with one of those two traits, that is a technical
Yeah, yeah.
professional, and the other one's going to feel very uncomfortable to us. But if we want to be a great leader, we're going to also have to lead on the one that's uncomfortable for us. And I think that that's something that requires work and effort, but I think a big piece of it, which I know is part of what, Luke focuses on, is bringing awareness to that for professionals, for leaders. Like I need to know where some of my blind spots are so I can focus on those and get better in those areas.
Yeah, and I like to think of something Edward Deming said, a great leadership expert. He said, "It's not enough to do your best. You have to know what to do and then do your best." And that's the hope of becoming a good leader is it's something you can learn to do, and you need to learn to do it, and you need to learn the skills. But if you do that and practice it, you can be very effective.
That's great. And I think that's important. That speaks to focus and prioritization, right? You have to know where to put your energy and then you
That's
got to
right.
do it to the best of your abilities, which I think is is really important. So a lot of AEC organizations, Luke, they invest in leadership training, on a regular basis. But the results don't always lead to kind of lasting change, right? It could be more fleeting. So what would you say separates a leadership development program that creates, real impact as opposed to one that just becomes like another check the box type of training event?
Yeah, that is the question, right? I mean, leadership development is a huge investment of time and money because you have to maybe step away from work to focus on it, and it requires money. And that is what we at Talent Matters have committed our careers and our business to figuring out. How do you create a leadership program, a leadership development initiative that sticks? And frankly, it's just not easy. Ensuring and building a system that leads to lasting change and someone learning the hard skill of leadership is hard for to execute, and it's hard for participants. It's a hard thing to do. It is doable, and so the key thing is you have to create a structure in your program that's going to facilitate that long-term change. You can't just hope people are going to take a bunch of information on a long 1 day workshop and put it into practice, because frankly it takes a lot of practice and we're all so busy. So a few things that we do that we always keep in mind and that we've worked on to create long-term impact and ensure that development sticks is first, the facilitators of the program have to be good leaders. You have to be good at facilitating the program, because if you think about it, facilitating a leadership program is influence. You're trying to influence someone to, hey, listen to me, do what I'm teaching you, and change your behavior because of what I'm saying. So you have to win their hearts and minds. Not all leadership programs are the same. And I think that's why some purely virtual or maybe video based, or only like if you're not interacting with a real human, you might have limited impact. It could be good content, which is great, but you might be missing out from a true life changing or career changing development opportunity. The second is the content just has to be good. I mean, these are just prerequisites. Facilitators have to be good. The content has to be good. It needs to challenge participants, challenge their hearts, challenge their minds, challenge their thinking, and motivate them to see the benefit of changing. Not all leadership programs, not all leadership content is created equal. So you really have to vet the content. A program is going to last or cause lasting impact if it builds not just knowledge, but knowledge that leads to skill, that leads to ability. So you can't just teach. After you teach, you have to have an opportunity to practice and then actually put it into practice in your real work life under the support of the mentorship of the program. So you can take that knowledge all the way to ability. And a few things that help that: one is the length of the program. If I go and learn a bunch of stuff all day, every day for 1, 2, or 3 days, and then just go back to my work, it could be the best content in the world, but I know you talk about this a lot, Anthony. I'm unlikely to remember it, to put it into play. I need the
Right.
time, the space, and even the internal support. If you hire external support to do leadership program, which I clearly support, being one of those external parties, you don't just rely on the external party to come in and do everything. There needs to be an internal support mechanism to protect the participants' time, to mentor them, to coach them, and to be there after I leave, to be there after the external facilitator leaves, and provide accountability, provide support for the action plan they create out of the program. So there's a lot of things, but those are the few important
Yeah.
things we keep front of mind as we seek to answer the question: How do you create leadership development that sticks?
Yeah, I like all of those a lot. I mean, obviously, we do a lot of the same stuff, both of our organizations. But the one I really like that last one where you talk about having people within the organization that could reinforce the learning. And I think that those are people that, even if you do an internal program, it's usually not the person giving the internal program, right? That might be run by like your L&D team, or right, because it's usually their managers that are going to need to reinforce what they're learning. And so, I guess the one thing about that is if you're planning a program of some sort, you're going to want to educate the managers of the people going through it on the concepts that they're learning so that they can reinforce it, right? And I think that that's really important because we do a lot of project management training, and when people do a foundations course, they want to put all their young PMs through the course, which is fine. But if the senior PMs or their managers aren't aware of what you're teaching them, you don't really have that group of people that are experienced that can reinforce it when, EMI leaves and we're not there anymore, to be there and help them. So I think that's important. And the other thing that I'll just say as a follow up to pretty much everything Luke said is, I think a big part of it is taking action after the learning, right? Like,
Yes.
for example, even if you listen to this podcast, right, and you want to take something out of it, right, you need to listen, maybe take a few notes and then try some things, right? Like if you read a book, it's great to read a book, but are you going to take the framework from that book or take a couple of key items from that book and practice them, right? Because that's the only way that you're going to be able to use it to improve. So I think taking action after is huge, but I also think to Luke's point, a lot of that is reliant upon how the course is taught, right? How it's facilitated, having someone to reinforce it. And so I think if you're someone who's looking to develop your own leadership skills, you're going to need to create ways that you can practice whatever you're learning. And if you're someone responsible for developing a group of leaders, you can really lean on hopefully some of the things that, Luke and I just kind of mentioned here in the last 5-10 minutes or so. I think that'll be really helpful for you. So, Luke, I want to dig a little bit deeper on this point as well. I know that leadership development is often delivered kind of the same way to everyone in an organization, right? They run a leadership program and they kind of go around, they give it to everybody. How can firms begin to personalize leadership development so that, it better fits individual leaders and their roles, which will likely, create a better return for everybody?
Yeah, personalization is such an important way to create that long-term impact. And I like what you said in the last, what we were just talking about action. If you need to be able to connect the learning in the program to the action I need to take, what is my current impact as a leader? And what is the impact I could have if I practice and try some new things? So, personalizing the content and the learning experience is an important way to do that. And it's a way to help me or the participant learn how to lead myself better, is one way to think about it, before I go lead others. We like to say before you start tinkering with the behaviors of others, which is what leaders do in a sense, I need to be able to manage my own behavior. So, one of the main ways we personalize a program is we use a good behavioral assessment to help someone identify their current tendencies. Very importantly, what are the tendencies that are helping you right now so you can more actively leverage those? But also, what are the things that could be undermining your good intentions that, if adjusted slightly, could change your impact and stop hurting yourself and help yourself more? And then it should be connected to the content of the program. So throughout an entire program, if you can connect back to that personal learning, whether it's through a C360 survey or a behavioral assessment like the Harrison assessment, which we use, which is powerful because it teaches paradoxical leadership. And but regardless what it is, the content should tie back to the personalized learning from that survey assessment or tool. And the more you can interconnect them, the more the person is going to be able to have true long-term growth. We use the image of a tree to provide a picture for what the growth of a leader looks like, and we say that you must grow down to grow up, just like a tree. A tree has to grow down first before it can grow up. And if you successfully personalize the learning experience, you're going to facilitate it to a leader to do true long term growth, which is to dig their roots deeper, understand themselves better, understand their impact, and then grow up, learn the skills of being a leader, bear fruit, actually lead the performance of others well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's awesome. I think that you you really need to have some indicators, of where you need help or where someone needs help to really meet them where they are, so to speak, to your point. And, I think that really goes for anything in life. Of course, if your company is doing some kind of leadership development program, it'd be awesome if they could start off with some kind of assessment process. Like Luke mentioned, they used the Harrison, the behavioral assessment of some sort, something to give you a baseline of this is where I'm at and I'm going through this program and I'm going to try to improve where I need to improve. And I think you can apply that even individually for those of you that are listening and just trying to improve your leadership skills. I think you need to get some kind of assessment. Like, it could be any assessment potentially. You go online, you could find something, but I think if you just say, "Hey, I want to become a better leader. I'm going to read this book. I'm going to go sign up for this course. I'm going to watch this video series." You don't necessarily know that it's going to help you or meet you where you are right now until you know where you are, so to speak, right? So, obviously, if there's something very specific, like, hey, I need to improve my public speaking, that gives you a little bit of a heads up on what you need to focus on. But there's so many different things as a manager that you might need help with, a certain tendency, a certain behavior, a certain communication style or action. So I think before you start spending time, energy, money, effort on developing yourself, you really need to create some kind of a baseline for yourself of where you need to improve. And again, that goes for you individually, the listener, but also if you're one listening to this saying, I need to put together a program for people, the same thing applies, right? You can understand, even though there's 20 people in your program, you could still do an assessment so that they have some insights into what they need. And you could still have a program that they all go through, but there could be some streams or threads through it that can help them speak to what their needs are. And I think that's really important for the success of the program, both for the individual and the organization. So, Luke, I know that you say that, time and influence are kind of the main two, the only two resources that a leader has. Talk about this. What do you mean by this, and how can leaders invest those resources kind of more effectively to support their teams and their organization?
Yeah, to any leader that's listening to this and hoping to get something out of it, I hope this gives you something to think about. We would say that the time you have to spend directly with your employees and the influence you have with your employees are really the only two resources you have to manage performance of those that you lead. And if time is an scarce resource, you only have so much of it. You can only spend so much with certain different people at different time. You need to invest it wisely. And if you invest it wisely, you'll get a good return on that, which will actually increase your influence. So this is the power of this idea. Time is the thing I invest, and from that time, I maximize my influence, because influence is the thing that works for you when you're not there. It's like the leader's voice in your head when
Right.
you're not there, driving you to perform well, because your employees want to perform well for a good leader, or the opposite could be true. If a leader's having a negative impact, that could degrade that desire to perform or give that discretionary effort. So something to think about is, as you think about your team, where should you spend your time? And there's a lot we could talk about around. You've got top performers that are already performing at a high level. You got those average middle performers that might be likely to go one way or the other, get better or could get worse. And then you got people that are struggling right now for any number of reasons. And where should you spend your time? And the reality is, most leaders get sucked into spending time in one of those categories, often maybe dealing with problems, and maybe aren't intentionally doing it. And so the key is to be proactive and try to identify where you can have the most impact. And often it's someone who's on the bubble or someone who's moving towards becoming a top performer. Of course, you shouldn't ignore anyone. Everyone's going to need your time at some point, but choose where you spend most of your time. And then influence, there's two sources of influence. You get influence from your organization. You have authority as a leader to do certain things in your specific leadership position. Many leaders shy away from using that out of a fear of coming across as powering over someone or using positional authority, but it's an important source of influence, and you can learn how to use it really well. And then the other is that influence you get from your team. They give you permission to lead them based on how well they want you to impact them, and you have to earn that, and it can be lost easily. And if you spend some time thinking about that influence you have with people and use both of those, your positional influence and your personal influence, you can have impact on your team even when you're not there, because we don't have a lot of time. And that's an exciting thing to think about. We spend a lot of time talking about this important concept and go very much in depth with leaders we work with. But just that economic model of thinking of how you invest your time, because it's limited, to increase your influence because your influence works for you when you're not there, is a really exciting thing to think about as a leader.
Yeah, it is really exciting. And I think what I think about when I hear you talk about time versus influence is leverage, right? Like you have a certain amount of time, and if you want to really leverage your time, you're going to want to create the maximum influence in that period of time, whatever that is, right? It could be getting the opportunity to speak to a lot of people in a training or a situation where you can really get the message out to a lot of people. Like you said, it could be bringing together the top leaders in your organization and giving them some important information or inspiration or tool or something so that they can go ahead and, do good work across all the different units or regions in the organization. And I think that's a huge leadership advantage if you get really good at, maximizing the amount of influence you can drive over the amount of time you have, right? I mean, if you have 2 hours in your day that day, you can do 2 hours where you're driving very little influence, or you could have 2 hours where you're driving a lot of influence depending on the actions you take. So, I think it's a great way to think about maximizing your influence and really, quite frankly, running a great leadership program like we've been talking about here for the past 20, 30 minutes is a great leverage point as well, right? Because now you're developing leaders in your organization, you're helping them lead better, and now they're going to go out and use their time and influence equation, right? So you can that's a really the kind of a ripple effect, if you will,
Yeah,
which is powerful.
time is so valuable, and leadership development programs are going to take time. You're going to have to step away from work and focus on it, but every hour should count. And yeah, it's such a good point about making sure each hour is having the maximum amount of influence for the participants.
So I want to talk a little bit about performance conversations because performance conversations can sometimes feel repetitive, they can feel monotonous. The same issues maybe continue to surface over time. What do you think causes cycles like this, and how can leaders maybe create more productive and more meaningful performance discussions so they don't feel like you're doing the same thing over and over once or twice a year, however often it happens?
Yeah, thank you for this question. Is not addressing performance problems one of the hardest things a leader can do? And if you think about it, it's not just hard for the leader, it's hard for the employee as well. It's just a challenging situation to be in. But looking at it from the positive, it's one of the best things a leader can learn how to do and for an employee to experience and grow from. And so isn't that the way it works? Some of the things that are hardest and can be causing the most problems for me as a leader has the opportunity for to be one of the most impactful things I can do as a leader. So all that to say, it is worth the investment of time, maybe even money as a leader to learn how to deal with poor performance or performance problems because they're going to happen. Everyone struggles with performance at times, and some people uh, might struggle more than others. But me as the leader, I have a responsibility to influence that. And too often, what we call Groundhog Day performance happens. What do I hear leaders say? I've had the same conversation over and over, and the performance just isn't changing. I feel like we've dealt with this, but it's back again. And a few points on that is I'll get to why that can happen in a moment. But well, one, it takes two people to solve a performance problem. It takes the leader and it takes the employee. Me as the leader, I only have control of myself and I can only influence the employee. So, step number one is to ensure I'm doing everything in my power to handle this situation correctly and I'm not undermining it. I'm not unintentionally hurting the situation and making it worse. And then it's up to the employee to respond. And if you do that well, you'll put the odds in your favor that they will. Because we see dealing with poor performance problems as a managerial moment of truth. Think about it. You're a leader. You see the performance of an employee relative to a standard, and it's below it. There's a gap. There's what should be done, and there's what was done, and they're not equal. So there's something negative happening, and there's a negative impact from that. And so you have a choice. It's a moment of truth. What could you do? You could ignore it, you could postpone it, you could procrastinate it, or you could overreact and deal with it too strongly. Both of those aren't going to solve the problem, and they will likely make it worse. And worst of all, they can destroy trust. So really the only solution is the third option you have, which is to address it with truth and respect. So I care about you enough to tell you what I see that's the problem and the impact it's having, but I'm also going to respect you and maintain your dignity through the process. You're not going to feel attacked. And that's hard. It takes courage. It takes courage to be truthful in that moment of truth, but it's worth it, like we already talked about. So, what are some reasons Groundhog Day performance happens? Number one is we can get sidetracked. Let's say you sit down, you decide to have the conversation. It's an uncomfortable conversation by nature. And when someone's confronted with a performance problem, it's just human nature. Whether we realize it or not, we might try to sidetrack, uh, turn to excuses, explanations, and get off topic. So the leader has to avoid getting sidetracked and become an expert at identifying rabbit trails or excuses or sidetracks, and respectfully, without discounting anything, bring it back on track to the topic you want to discuss. The second thing is leaders sometimes fail to get agreement on reality. If you fail to get agreement on what has happened and the negative impact it's had, you miss the opportunity to get clarity and agreement. And that's going to make it hard to do anything else and actually solve the problem. The third thing is you got to look backwards. How did we get here? If you fail to get a clear understanding and open up the conversation and have a discussion about what happened that led you to this point, that led to this performance problem, you're not going to get personal ownership for what's happened. If you don't get personal ownership, you're unlikely to solve the actual problem. But if you do get personal ownership, you then can solve the problem with the employee. So the fourth thing that can lead to Groundhog Day performance is failing to get a personal commitment for the solution. If you don't talk about what the solution is going to be and ensure the employee understands it and commits to it themselves, meaning they say the solution back to you, you're not going to have as high a personal commitment as you could. And then the last thing, and probably most importantly, they're all important, but if you fail to create clear consequences for the future, you're gonna likely have the conversation again. Consequences are positive and negative. It's just being truthful. Hey, if you solve this thing like we just talked about, I think that's a great solution. This is the positive thing that's going to happen. If you don't, this is the negative thing that's going to happen. You're not punishing, you're just being truthful about what's going to happen. And what it communicates is we're not going to have the same conversation again. That's not a threat. It's just being truthful that if this happens, this is what's going to happen. And then if you have to have a conversation again, you're having a different conversation, and working towards a long-term solution or creating clarity that something needs to change, maybe responsibilities or whatever it is. So those are the things we see that lead to Groundhog Day performance conversations. But the exciting thing is if you learn the skills to have this conversation, it can be one of the most impactful things a leader learns to do. And it's it's the favorite part of my job. I get to teach leaders how to have this most difficult conversation and to do it with skill and in a way that maintains the respect of the employee so that they benefit from it as well. So the opportunity is great to benefit the organization, the employee, and yourself as the leader by becoming an expert at dealing with poor performance.
I think that's great, and I really like how you laid it out in steps there. I think that's good for technical professionals who like a good framework. But I do think at the end of the day, what you're describing is, we have to have these tough conversations that, people need to hear, and we need to give people feedback, whether it's positive or critical, because that's what allows them to grow. And I think some of the tips that you've provided there in terms of, being clear, setting the expectations, having the consequences associated with it are really helpful in making sure that that conversation is productive and meaningful, as opposed to just one of the, like you said, the groundhog conversations, which is great. All right, Luke, last question I have for you. For those leaders that are listening out there that are thinking about improving leadership outcomes across their organization, right? They're tasked with trying to improve leadership company wide, organizationally. Where should they start, in your opinion, from everything you've seen in working with companies and organizations?
Yeah, where you should start from my perspective, and then I might have an add on of what you do after that, is get the right people on your team. Never rush the hiring process, the selection process. I think no hire is better than a bad hire because that's where the win win is. You want the right people on your team that can do the job well because that's going to be the best thing for those people you bring on the team. It's going to be the best thing for you as a leader. And most importantly, it's going to be the best thing for what the organization needs to do to serve the community and provide the thing you are providing to your community. Then if you do that well, you also need to equip leaders to lead well. And I would think about that from two aspects, which is a theme we've been carrying through this conversation. Leaders need to be equipped to lead themselves first and then lead others. You could think of it as if you do those two things, you'll in effect give leaders the ability to give themselves permission to take charge and lead their teams in the way you want them to. And if you equip them to do that, you get to get all those benefits that we've been talking about throughout this whole conversation. So hire the right people and then lead them well in a way that they'll want to stick around and keep giving you good results. And that's where I think a priority should be.
Good stuff. And again, I really think that that part about, hiring the right people is really important, especially in the AEC industry where companies are busy, right? And they're looking to hire people as fast as they can to get people on board to help them with their projects. But again, the challenge with that, as Luke described here, is you might be able to quickly find someone, but if it's not the right person, it could do more bad than good, quite frankly, in your organization. So you really have to take the time to think about doing that. So once again, Luke Carter, managing partner at Talent Matters. Luke, thank you so much for spending some time with us here on the AEC Leadership Podcast.
Thank you, Anthony. I've enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Luke. I've really gotten to know Luke, Colin, Reed, their team over the years. We've done a lot of work with them, and they're really good about getting to the root of things and helping to build leaders kind of from the ground up. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you did, please subscribe to our channel here. We put out videos like this on a weekly basis to help technical professionals become better managers and leaders. I'll see you next week.